So we're witnessing something here which is honestly pretty astonishing. It is the most forthright assault on the First Amendment that I've seen in modern American history. There's a lot of people on the right who've been saying for a long time, hey, the left is really censorious and they don't want free speech, and there's ample evidence of this. And usually the examples they give is you have some conservative speaker who goes to a college campus and some lefties try to get them kicked off and not allowed to speak. And look, oftentimes it works, and you get these events canceled. And in those instances, I'll be clear, I don't agree with the lefties who say you're not allowed to have an Ann Coulter speech or you're not allowed to have a Ben Shapiro speech. By all means, I think they should have the right to speak in those instances. Now, it is separate, though, from a First Amendment issue, right? Because technically the school could decide whoever they want to allow to speak and who they don't want to allow to speak. And so it's not actually a First Amendment issue, but I agree that it's the spirit of free speech and an open exchange of ideas. Like, the spirit is in question there, and I'm almost always going to side with more speech. Now, having said that, all this crying and whining and bitching and moaning from the right for the past 5 years about how the left is so censorious and they're so against free speech. Well, here we're now facing an actual assault on the First Amendment and free speech and freedom to protest, and the right is crickets. In fact, the people who led the crusade for free speech previously are now cheering on the censorship and the crackdown. Namely, people like Ben Shapiro, who hasn't said a word about this, Dave Rubin, who has said a word about this, and he comes out and openly supports cracking down on free speech when he disagrees with the issue. So let me walk you through this. Look at this, guys. Columbia University is suspending Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voice for Peace as official student groups through the end of the fall term. So they're disbanding pro-Palestine groups on college campuses. So I'll give you more specifics on it. This is directly from Columbia News. Columbia University is suspending Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voice for Peace as official student groups through the end of the fall term. This decision was made after the two groups repeatedly violated university policies related to holding campus events, culminating in an unauthorized event Thursday afternoon that proceeded despite warnings and included threatening rhetoric and intimidation. Okay, so first of all, I would like to know the specifics on this, which they don't bring up. What's the threatening rhetoric and what's the intimidation that we're talking about? That's the first point. Second point is the argument of, hey, we warned you not to have this assembly. That's not very convincing to me, because that's just you saying, I don't want you to exercise your free speech. I don't want you to have a protest that we don't agree with or we don't want for whatever reason. That would be against the spirit of the First Amendment, against the spirit of free speech and freedom to protest and an open exchange of ideas. So, but now let's go a step further. Even if they could cite, hey, there's some threatening rhetoric or intimidation here or there, as long as it's not in violation of the First Amendment. So in other words, as long as it's not a direct call to violence or defamation or something of that nature, it's still allowed. Remember, the Supreme Court ruled in the Skokie case that literal neo-Nazis were allowed to march through a predominantly Jewish crowd as long as they were peaceful. So this right literally extends to people as extreme as Nazis. And in this instance, they're saying Jewish Voice for Peace and Students for Justice in Palestine, what, they're more extreme than Nazis? Get out of here. My guess is they're saying the threatening rhetoric and intimidation is when some people say, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. There's been this massive effort on the right among hardcore Israel supporters to say, hey, anybody who argues that is saying they want to genocide the Jews or kill all the Israelis. And then they fall back on or wipe out the state of Israel. Now, when you hear that, oh, we're going to wipe Israel off the map. When you hear that, what do you think? You immediately think, oh, they want to do a genocide? They don't want to kill all the Jews? They want to kill all the Israelis? That's what you think. But there are plenty of people who are part of this group and groups like it who, when they say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, what they mean is we want one state in the region with democratic rights for all, including Israelis and Palestinians, Jews and Muslims, one secular democracy with equal rights for all. That's what they mean when they say that. Now, look, you don't have to agree with that perspective. You could disagree on how you fix the Israel-Palestine situation. You could disagree on that. But to just smear everybody who says from the river to the sea as if they're all Hamas or Hamas supporters is incredibly disingenuous, and they know that. And they know that. Yes, it is true that when somebody in Hamas says from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, they do mean wipe Israel off the map, and many of them probably do mean expel them all or kill them all. I'm sure. But some 19-year-old college kid with a septum ring and purple hair is not a Hamas militant. And you can ask them what they mean when they say it. And in almost all the cases, I assure you, they will say, we just mean we want a free Palestine. We just mean we want one democratic state for all. Some people will say call it Israel. Some people will say call it Palestine. Some people will say make it binational and call it Israel-Palestine. But these are people who want one democratic state with equal rights and voting rights for all. The idea that that's beyond the pale or unacceptable or hate-filled rhetoric is just totally bogus. It's just bogus. So then they go on in this letter to Virtue Signal, like, bro, we're actually totally in favor of like free speech and open debate and stuff. Really? Well, you're doing the exact opposite here by disbanding these groups. So look, I want to remind you of something. As they're cracking down on these pro-Palestine groups, think about what's going on at the moment. Just want to remind you all, this is where we're at with Israel's assault on Gaza. We have 14,000 people killed, including almost 13,000 civilians and nearly 6,000 children. Israel's killed 47 journalists. They damaged 66 mosques. They bombed churches, 3 churches. There's 192 doctors and nurses who've been killed by the Israeli bombing. Over half of Gaza is destroyed. It's indiscriminate bombing. So at a time like this, you absolutely need pro-Palestinian voices having the ability to express their disapproval, to put pressure on politicians, for example. Like, this is what you need. And they're shutting it all down. They're saying, no, you're saying threatening things. You're making us feel unsafe. Oh, you need a safe space. Is that what you need? So in other words, the hardcore Israel supporters and the right have now become the snowflakes who are begging for a safe space. So with these facts on the ground, and they're saying pro-Palestinian groups have to be suspended. Think about how insane that is. That's like disbanding anti-Vietnam War groups during the height of the Vietnam War. That's like disbanding anti-Iraq war groups during the height of the Iraq War. It's totally unacceptable. All right, so now, look at what else we got here. This is another great example of how insane we've gotten. We're in a moment of hysteria and mania. A 13-year-old kid in Orange County, California, was called a terrorist by a classmate. He responded with, quote, free Palestine, and was suspended for 3 days. The school administration expressed to my nephew that the words free Palestine meant death to all Jews and should never be said. Look, they just have to straw man in order to make the case that this rhetoric is unacceptable. So first they object to from the river to the sea. And now you have people even objecting to saying free Palestine. Free Palestine could mean a 2-state solution. It doesn't even have to mean a 1-state democratic solution for all. It could mean let's have an Israel and a Palestine. But according to them, free Palestine means you want to genocide all the Jews, so we're going to suspend you. This is an all-out war on free speech. Look, I don't even care what you think about the issue. You could be a staunch pro-Israel advocate and look at this and say, this is unacceptable. We've gone way too far. And look, to be clear, this is an escalation of previous policies that we've seen on this exact issue. That's what it is. So now you have pro-Palestine groups on college campuses. There's an assault on them. There's a war on them. They're trying to disband them and suspend them. By the way, Colombia is not the only one that's doing this. Others are doing it as well. So don't say you believe in free speech if you don't believe in it for this group, for these groups. Now people are saying free Palestine is genocidal. And finally, I want to give you the backstory as to how we got here. There's always been, on this one issue, there's always been weird exceptions among our politicians. Hey, you can say anything, but don't do that. Don't say that. Look at this. This is from Human Rights Watch. States use anti-boycott laws to punish responsible businesses. Laws penalize companies that cut ties with Israeli settlements. You want to know how bad it was leading into what just happened? Many United states are using anti-boycott laws and executive orders to punish companies that refuse to do business with illegal Israeli settlements in the West Bank, Human Rights Watch said today. More than 250 million Americans, some 78% of the population, live in states with anti-boycott laws or policies. 27 states, the majority of states, have adopted laws or policies that penalize businesses, organizations, or individuals that engage in or call for boycotts against Israel. The laws or policies in 17 of those states explicitly target not only companies that refuse to do business in or with Israel, but also those that refuse to do business in Israeli settlements on the illegally occupied territories. Some states whose laws do not explicitly apply to settlements have also penalized companies that cut settlement ties. So in a majority of U.S. states, there are anti-BDS laws. So BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions, is a way to try to pressure Israel to give Palestinians human rights through economic pressure. So it's a more peaceful method than some sort of violent resistance. That's what it is. And in a majority of states, they crack down on people who do this. So for example, I think there was a law, I think it was in Houston, where they said in order to get hurricane relief money, I think it was from Hurricane Harvey, you need to promise not to boycott Israel. You need to sign something that states you will not boycott Israel. I mean, that's just one of the more absurd examples. But there are many, many examples of similar things. So think about it. In the United States of America, you could literally call for a boycott of the United States of America, and it's totally legal and fine. You could call for a boycott of another state within the country, totally legal and fine. You can call for a boycott of Saudi Arabia. You can call for a boycott of Britain. But if you call for a boycott of Israel, there could be legal penalties associated with it. You don't have the free speech rights to do that without attempts to withhold various government subsidies and money from you that other people would have access to. So this is what it was like leading into this situation. And now you're seeing where this ramp up came from. Now you're seeing they already had the groundwork for anti-free speech policies as it pertains to Israel. Now they're saying Students for Justice in Palestine, Jewish Voice for Peace. By the way, why can't we play the identity game now and flip it on you and say, you want to ban Jewish Voice for Peace? Are you anti-Semitic? Is Colombia anti-Semitic for doing this? Are all the states that are cracking down on the pro-Palestinian groups led by Jews, are they all anti-Semitic? You guys are acting pretty anti-Semitic. You're banning Jewish groups on campuses. That seems pretty goddamn anti-Semitic to me. We could all play that game. I'd rather just stick to the details and the facts and the reality that this country has a First Amendment. It has free speech. It has freedom to protest. You can say what you want. You can do what you want as long as you're not hurting anybody else. Nobody's hurting anybody here, but they're cracking down. This is an all-out war on pro-Palestine free speech, and it is super obvious, and everybody needs to stand against it. And all these right-wing charlatans who cloak themselves in, we're the biggest believers in free speech, every single one of them that doesn't speak on this are shameless, shameless frauds. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.